It's the dream of millions of people, complete self-sufficiency, to grow all of their own food and never have to take a trip to the grocery store. But for most people, it's just that, a dream. The ease of our current global industrial food system is just that, too easy, too convenient, too time-saving, and too alluring. I've been exploring food for nearly a decade, and since the beginning, I've had the burning question. Could I step outside of the big ag system? Could I go without grocery stores and restaurants? Nothing packaged or processed, nothing shipped from a far-off place. Could I grow and forage 100% of my food, everything that I ate for an entire year? That's exactly the journey and the quest that I decided to set out on, and now I'm here to share the story with you. But one big thing. I had very little experience with growing my own food. When I lived in San Diego, I did have a few raised beds where I grew some greens, tomatoes, and herbs. But as a traveler for the last 7 or so years, I had never really settled in one place long enough to grow my own food. So in order to do this, I would have to settle in one place. And that place that I chose is Orlando, Florida, where I'm sitting right now. Besides being really fresh to growing my own food, I was also fresh to the scene here in Orlando and Florida. And I was giving myself just 2 years here before hitting the road again. So I had to get planting as soon as I landed here. But I didn't have a garden, I didn't own any land, and I had almost no experience with foraging in the state of Florida. I chose Florida so that I could grow food year-round. And I chose Orlando because I had passed through here a few times and met a great community of permaculturists and people who grow their own food. And specifically, I chose the community of Audubon Park because that's where Orlando Permaculture and my friends at Fleet Farming were based, and there was already a movement here of turning front yards into gardens, so I would have the support I needed in order to do it here. I quickly got to work meeting people in my neighborhood and proposing the idea to them of turning their front lawns into gardens. It really wasn't hard to find takers because it was a pretty sweet deal. Their boring lawn would be turned into a garden, I'd do almost all of the work, cover the costs, and they could eat all the food they liked right from their front yard. In fact, I quickly had a list of lawns longer than I could handle. The transformation was amazingly quick, and within just a few months, I was growing more food than I could eat myself and sharing it with friends in the neighborhood. I ended up creating 6 small plots, all within easy cycling distance of each other. I was just figuring out what I was doing the whole time. I went to local meetups like Orlando Permaculture, volunteered in the garden with Fleet Farming, visited farms and gardens and nurseries, took foraging classes with local foragers like Green Dean, read books by local growers, and watched videos online and more. For a place to live, I built a simple tiny house homestead in the backyard of a community member that I met. And in exchange for using their space, I turned their monoculture of grass into an at-home supermarket. Starting from scratch, it took me 10 months to be comfortable and ready to begin my year. November 11th, 2018 would be my first day. It was now time to eat 100% from my gardens and food that I would forage. Now, when I say 100%, I truly mean it. No grocery stores or restaurants, no drinks at a bar, nothing packaged or processed, nothing shipped long distances, no farmers markets, not even going over to my friend's pantry or even going to their gardens or their food forests. Why not share food from my friends' gardens? Because I wanted to truly immerse in my food. I wanted to have to literally figure out how to grow every single food or ingredient that I needed, or how to source it from nature. Many people know me for my dumpster diving to raise awareness about food waste. And a lot of people who follow me online assumed that I would still be eating from dumpsters. But nope, no food from dumpster diving at all. I had already proved to myself that I could live off of the waste of our globalized food system. Now it was time to see if I could step away from that completely. That included everything that I put in my body, even supplements, vitamins, and medicines. Now you'd think on day one that maybe I'd have eaten a lot of 100% homegrown and foraged meals, but to be honest, my first meal on day one was my first 100% homegrown and foraged meal of my entire life. It was day one and I was in the deep end. But I had laid the foundation that I needed. My gardens scattered across the neighborhood were full of food, and I had scouted out food both in the city and the countryside to forage. My supermarket was on nearly every street I could walk down, and the shelves were stocked. Over the last 365 days, I grew and harvested over 100 different foods from my gardens and foraged over 200 different foods from nature. That's a new species for almost every single day of the year. I grew a dozen different greens packed with nutrients: moringa, katuk, chaya, purslane, collards, kale, and perennial spinaches, just to name a few. I grew sweet potatoes, cassava, and yams for my main caloric needs, pigeon peas and southern peas for protein, delicious fruits like papayas and bananas, Seminole pumpkins, carrots, eggplants, just to name a few vegetables.